We just got a massive update from Warner Brothers about their current and future superhero games, including the upcoming open world Wonder Woman game, and some fans are not going to be happy.
You think you can do this to me?
What to do, Direct Nation? I'm back with Super News, bringing you the latest superhero news without wasting your time if you subscribe. So if this information was valuable, hit the like button so it will reach more people, but if it wasn't for you, change it to a dislike. DC's strategy when it comes to adaptations for their video games have been very different from Marvel. Marvel has been steadily flooding both the console and mobile game market by licensing out the rights to use their IP to any company willing to pay, in part due to Disney not being successful at being a game publisher. In comparison, DC's huge roster has been largely left to waste, despite WB Games being one of the industry's most successful publishers, which in theory should have allowed them to flood the market with DC superhero games. Since WB owns DC, it wouldn't have to deal with licensing costs or red tape. Unfortunately, up to now, WB has been content to occasionally release Batman-related projects every 5 years or so from one of their studios, with the only exception being DC Universe Online, a game that came out over 10 years ago and still hasn't gotten an update to take it out of the PS3 era and the Injustice series. But that seems to have changed under the leadership of James Gunn, who is committed to expanding his new DCU into gaming, as well as new CEO David Zaslov, who seemingly discovered for the first time after the tremendous success of Hogwarts Legacy that people like video games, and they should make more of those since they own so many popular IPs. Zaslov then went on to tease a potential Superman game to take advantage of James Gunn's Superman Legacy, which is scheduled to hit theaters in 2 years. But at a recent earnings call, the CEO shed some light on their plans for their games moving forward. Zaslov said, "Our focus is on transforming our biggest franchises from largely console and PC based with 3-4 year release schedules to include more always-on gameplay through live services, multi-platform and free-to-play extensions, with the goal to have more players spending more time on more platforms. Ultimately, we want to drive engagement and monetization of longer cycles and at higher levels. We have put specific capabilities. We are currently under scale and see significant opportunity to generate greater post-purchase revenue." Naturally, a bunch of people stopped listening and immediately reached for their pitchforks when they heard him say live service, especially people who walked away unimpressed from the State of Play earlier this year that showed off their upcoming superhero live service shooter, Suicide Squad. This has overall been an incredible year for gaming, though not so much for the people who develop the games. However, we've seen live service shooter Redfall crash and burn, Bungie and Epic laying off employees despite having two of the most successful live service games in the world, and even Sony scaling back their own live service commitments by 50%. But this isn't necessarily a bad move by Warner Brothers, quite the opposite. For one, there's obviously still a giant market for live service games. GTA 6, the sequel to a decade-old live service game that sold another 5 million copies just in the last quarter, took over the internet by essentially telling people they're releasing a commercial next month. But Zaslov also mentioned free-to-play extensions with the ultimate goal of getting people to spend more time on their games across all platforms. This is very important to keep in mind because a lot of players hear live service and make a bunch of assumptions that are more often than not completely wrong. For example, Suicide Squad is being criticized for its live service elements, but if you actually research what those are, it doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense to be angry at all. The game's live service elements so far consist of a battle pass purely for cosmetics that don't affect gameplay and the promise of free post-launch content in the form of new missions and playable characters. I have personally never heard of a gamer that is opposed to getting post-launch content for a game they already bought. In fact, many beg for it even if it will cost them money, like the Insomniac Spider-Man games, Horizon Forbidden West, and Elden Ring. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be mad at a game offering you new characters and missions for free. That's because live service doesn't mean what most gamers think it means. It could mean a microtransaction heavy experience like NBA 2K, which costs players nearly $200 to max out one character, or it could come in the form of free additional content like Gotham Knights. One upcoming game from WB we know now for a fact will have live service elements is Wonder Woman, thanks to a job posting that lists experience helping maintain a live product or game under potential qualifications they'll be looking for as a bonus. This raised red flags with some fans, even though Wonder Woman is a single-player game, because it's being developed by Monolith, the creators of the beloved Middle-earth games like Shadow of War. Unfortunately, that game in particular got a lot of backlash from players due to the presence of the sorts of live service elements that make the term such a dirty word, like loot boxes that offered the chance to roll premium gear. The backlash from players for what was otherwise a great game was so intense that eventually the developers released a patch patch that removed microtransactions from the game entirely. However, live service elements will be returning to Monolith's Wonder Woman game, though we don't yet know which ones Wonder Woman will employ. Hopefully they don't go beyond the ability to buy additional cosmetics for Diana and additional playable content. It's reasonable to assume Monolith will have learned their lesson from Shadow of War, but live service elements aren't exactly new for WB's superhero games, and players haven't been turning it down either. Batman Arkham Knight, which is constantly praised by gamers, especially the ones who claim to hate live service games, had a season pass and released both new skins and playable characters. Despite being 8 years old, that game is also getting a new update next month that will bring with it the Robert Pattinson Batman suit. I think these are the kinds of live service elements most people can get behind, especially if they're cheap like the Arkham post-launch content was. I personally love having reasons to go back to games that I enjoyed, so I'm personally welcoming this decision as long as it's done properly, because now this leaves the door open for the game WB should have been pushing out next year, which is a Justice League game. I know a lot of people still have Marvel's Avengers PTSD, but if that game had been made in the right engine by a studio that understood how to make multiplayer games, it would have been the biggest game in the world. An open world action game where you can play as the entire Justice League with new characters and villains added yearly. Sign me up, I live in that game now. And in case you aren't convinced, or you happen to be the CEO of Warner Brothers and are looking for ideas, I made a video showing exactly how you could make this Justice League game. Check that out in the next video on screen.